when the next time on Star Trek Picard came up in the finale, and I saw the trailer for the upcoming episode, Clay, I was so excited. Probably the most excited I've seen for any episode that's upcoming in the series yet, just because I know that it's going to be over. After we're done with this next week, we will be over with Star Trek Picard.
Put that on the poster.
Yeah, just you'll be looking for you won't be able to wait until the end.
You won't be able to wait to see what happens, so you cannot watch it anymore.
Maybe that's enough to lead this one off, and we'll take a break now. We'll play some music, and then we'll come back, and we're going to talk about Et and Arcadia Ego. All right, so this is Et and Arcadia Ego Part 1. It's the 9th episode of the first season of Star Trek Picard, first aired on March 19th, 2020. Teleplay goes to Michael Chabon and Ayelet Waldman, who's actually his wife, I believe. Michael Chabon and Ayelet Waldman and Akiva Goldsman are the story credit, directed by Akiva Goldsman, whose name you probably remember because he's been around since Discovery, and then before that, he's actually an Oscar winner, I think, for something, but we'll see. In this episode, following an unconventional and dangerous transit, Picard and the crew finally arrive at Soji's homeworld, Coppelius. However, with Romulan warbirds on their tail, their arrival brings only greater danger as the crew discovers more than expected about the planet's inhabitants. And Clay, I think the main takeaway I had from this was, we talked about in the last episode, what we were looking forward to in these remaining 2 episodes, and I've come to realize that my prediction of not much probably came true, because I'm certainly having a hard time caring about where this is going to go at this point, because I think they've totally lost me to this at this junction as to what I'm supposed to be grounded in and what I'm supposed to think is like the story, and what I'm supposed to think about is the character that I'm supposed to be concerned about. And I think they've completely lost me, and I feel very alone and isolated, much like Bruce Maddox on this planet building synths.
Well, you don't need to feel alone and isolated, because I'm right there with you.
Great.
I texted you earlier in the day when I was watching this, and I said, what the hell is this show supposed to be about? And I meant that in an episode sense and also in a larger sense, because I don't know. I'm feeling the same way, where I'm like, I don't know really what. All I know is there's going to be a big battle next episode, and I don't really know what I'm supposed to care about, how we actually got to this point. Like, I felt like there were so many. This felt like an episode. You know how I say a lot, where a lot of the Discovery episodes or these newer Trek episodes, it's almost like if you only watch the previously on, you're probably better off, and everything seems like it makes more sense.
Yeah, because they only highlight the very important bits that brought you to that point. In the previously.
This one was kind of the opposite of that for me, because I watched everything, and they were talking about stuff that I did not track at all. Mm-hmm. And like, the more I thought about it, the more nothing that got us here really made a ton of sense to me.
I'm starting to, well, they've hit the point now where I'm started to be overloaded with the plot to the point where I can't remember how we got here. So like, when I was watching the Red Letter Media review of these, of the previous like 6, 7, and 8 episodes, I think, and I honestly don't remember a lot of the mechanics that those guys are talking about in that video, because they're a couple episodes behind us at this point.
Right.
We started the series just by saying that, like, I thought that it felt different from Discovery. I'm now at the point where I realize it's no different than Discovery is in any sense. Like, maybe the only thing that this show did differently, and I would say superior to what Discovery did, is that it did set things up in a way that felt like it had more of a structure to what was going to happen in the series. It kind of abandoned that, and I think it gave up on it. But at least as opposed to Discovery, where I never feel like I really understand what's going on in any point of the story, this was, I thought I knew
keeping you on your toes, man. It's marked a good story.
I thought that this was, I knew where it was going to go, and by the end of it, it's not gone anywhere near that. And I don't know, there's a lot more specifics that we'll get into, but I just feel like it was kind of a depressing episode for me, just because I honestly ended it going like, do I want to talk about the new Star Treks on the podcast anymore? It's like, because I feel that this and Discovery get to a same point where the tone of our conversation is like, it starts off when we're kind of like, oh, we'll see where this goes. And then the middle, like, we're like, yeah, we're kind of running out of time. Like, are they going to do anything with this? Yeah. And then by the end of it, you're just like, yeah, okay. Like, this is exactly like Discovery in that it's going to end with a whole bunch of loose ends that they're not going to tie up. It's just going to have these info strands that you thought were important or that you thought you were going to get clued into are not going to be resolved. And the writing team is just going to say it's just something that you need to ignore.
Yeah, I'm not the kind of person who needs everything tied up for me. I think there's a certain point where you can kind of let the characters and stuff take over. So as long as you kind of stick the landing from a character standpoint and as long as the action that gets you there seems like it makes sense, I don't really need a ton of explanations like Children of Men we just covered.
Yeah, I was just thinking that. Yeah.
But it's like by the time the ball starts rolling, you're not really thinking about the mechanics of like the uprising that's happening, and they give you just enough to get you across the finish line. And I think it works pretty well. This, on the other hand, is these new Trek shows feel like they are. I don't know, this is going to sound like me being such an asshole. They feel like they think they're really smart and they want to show off how intricate their plotting is, but half of the stuff that they do doesn't actually make a lot of narrative sense and they don't pay it off. So by the time you get to the end, they've got so much stuff they jam at the beginning, they don't have enough time to do anything interesting in the middle. Then they jam even more stuff into the end to try and close it all up. And I'm just sitting there thinking, like, what was Bruce Maddox's role in any of this? And why was Bruce Maddox cowering in the dungeon of a casino magnate on a casino planet? Like, yeah. How did he get there? Why is he there? But they're talking about him. At one point, Sutra says to Soji, "You completed your mission," and my head almost exploded because I had no idea what she was talking about.
I know, and she didn't explain it either.
She never says what her mission was.
Yeah, I know.
And then on top of that, since they got to wrap it up, they've got all these character moments that are completely unearned. You've got Picard and what's his name?
Raffi, saying they love each other.
Oh yeah, that one. You've done so much for me by telling me to stop drinking once.
I love you, JL.
Yeah.
I mean, the one consistent thing that they've nailed with Picard's characterization is that they do show him in this series to be uncomfortable with emotion, which is fine, which would be a good thread, but that's like the only consistent characterization trait that he has the entire series, I feel like.
Yeah, and you've got the scene with Elnor where he's like, "I am so proud of the person you have become." It's like, he didn't do anything. He's anything he has done, you haven't been present for.
Yeah.
And and then you've got this later bit with Girardi and Rios.
Oh my God, they're in love now because they slept together one time. Yeah,
they've had like maybe 3 minutes worth of dialogue together across 10 episodes. And same with the closest one you can come to actually having being earned, which still doesn't work, is Soji and Narek. When Narek is like, but I love you, but he's obviously trying to like mess with her and stuff.
Yes,
But even so, it's like nothing about that is believable. Actually, I should say I did think it was believable because of the way that they handle that stuff in this show. I was like, oh, I mean, yeah. I just assumed it's like all the other ones where it's just an unearned emotional character beat.
Yeah.
And I forgot that he was just fucking with her.
Right. Because if it's unearned, it all comes across as kind of tricksy and subterfuge or something. So he fits right into that kind of stuff.
Taking life to save life. Hurting some to save others. I guess I'm just trying to understand the logic of sacrifice.
The logic of sacrifice. I don't like the sound of that.
That's a Discovery Modern Trek characteristic, I think. Like that's just it happens in Discovery all the time. It happens in this show. I guess maybe to get into the specifics of this episode, I'm incredibly disturbed that Brent Spiner is in this episode for no reason whatsoever.
Oh boy.
People were making the argument that Seven feels like she was just kind of shoehorned in, and I think that's kind of an argument I can get behind, but it's also at the same time, it feels like she had something to kind of do in this. This one, I have to assume by how badly this character, this new Soong character is brought in, that he is lying about who he is, right? Like there's no way this is the son of Soong that has never been mentioned before in any way, shape, or form.
I don't know, man. The lead of Star Trek Discovery is the sister of Spock, who's never been mentioned before.
That's true, but it's like that's.
I mean, if halfway through the episode, the next episode, when everything is falling apart at the seams, he like rubs his face and his skin comes off, and underneath is and it's lore in disguise, I will stand up and I will give this show a round of applause. But unless that happens, I don't know. My theory about that character is that it was the only way they could get Brent Spiner to do it.
Maybe, but it's like, oh, sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
Well, I was just going to say, because I feel like you want to pop in and do the shitty data makeup that you hate for 2 days, and he probably said no. And
right.
They're like, all right, what if you get to be on the show, but you can be you? And he's like, well, that's something I would love to do.
Yes. And they have had Soong descendants before. There's a Soong descendant in Enterprise that he plays. And
oh, does he really?
Yeah,
oh, that's fun.
And so it's not like this is an unheard of thing to have him come in and play some kind of Soong, because he plays Nooning Soong in the TNG episodes and everything like that. Mm-hmm. I think that the problem is
in an acting tour de force, yes, where he plays 3 characters at once
in an otherwise middling episode. I think that I think the problem character wise here is that Soong was always played as if Data and Lore were his children. Like he is he's not the kind of character who actually has a biological child. Like
kind of defeats the purpose. Yes,
right. So like his whole thing is built around Data and Lore. He has built images of himself, and he treats them like his children. The interactions he has with them are very much like he's their father, and that they are not synthetic to him at all. He treats them like real people, and to just have this character come in, he says, "Hey, I'm dickhead Soong," or whatever, and Picard doesn't even bat an eye at him. He's just like, "Hey, you look like Data."
Yeah.
That's it. And I can't remember if Picard has ever met a Soong. I don't think he has. So you'd think he would be more impressed by this, but the plot of the show is so quick that they just have to bring him in. He says a bunch of nonsense, and then Picard's like, "Hey, you look like Data," and then they move on from it. It's so strange. It felt like Spiner just kind of stopped by, and they felt like they had to put him into the show because he was hanging out on the sidelines or something. I think that's the most like indulgent stuff that they've done so far, I think, because I can get behind Riker and Troy, I can get behind early Data appearances, but this new Soong just doesn't work at all for me, and it's weird to just shove him in at the end. Yeah,
I mean, I don't know. I
didn't bother you as much. Yeah.
I mean, at this point, I whatever. It was just like, all right, they're going to a planet inhabited by synthetics. Bruce Maddox is dead, so they got to talk to someone.
You need a new a Maddox stand-in or something like that. Yeah.
And like that's the weird thing about it, because it's this whole. Is it like the most poorly telegraphed red herring ever that you operate for the first 8 episodes with the assumption that Bruce Maddox is the one who created these two? And then when you get to the 9th episode, they're like, "Oh no, he didn't create them. He just took them and left."
Did he? With the Soong character didn't build them though, did he? Because I
believe so.
Well, they have that scene where he's talking about like he was good with bodies and he can't work on the mind or something. So that's why he had the Maddox and Girardi team with him. I think I think that's what they're implying. I think that he's like because they have that Girardi scene where she's like, "Oh, you built a golem," and he's like, "Yes, I'm good at building the bodies, but I can't do much else with it or something." So he seems like a failure of a Soong, but
he can't do mind transference.
Oh, is that the difference?
Which I want to know who's going into that body.
Yeah.
But honestly, probably nobody, because that's the same kind of thing as the glowing green badges on the Borg ship.
Right.
It has potential to be something cool, but they're probably not going to do anything with it. Unless my first thought was they put Picard into it to get rid of his brain thing.
Right. And he just becomes a synthetic from that point on.
Yeah.
I think you're, I mean, the specifics about the episode are just, I was tremendously bored throughout this one.
Oh God, it was so boring.
It's an incredibly boring episode. Spiner is weird to be in there. What were your takeaways from it?
Yeah, I just, it was so, I just feel like they had so much stuff going on that they jammed in at the end of this season, that where you should be ratcheting up your tension and your excitement going into your finale, you're explaining more stuff. And I mean, the plus side to it, if I had to give it a plus side, it's probably one of the more Star Trek-y episodes. Like maybe half of it is one of the more Star Trek-y episodes they've done, just because they go down to a planet.
Yeah, that looks very Star Trek-y. People wearing flowy clothing and sort of walking around doing nothing. Yeah.
And just the fact that they have like an ethical discussion about, with this race of people, synthetics, about the ethics of killing out of like murder versus self-defense and stuff. They get into a little bit, which it was an interesting scene, but ultimately didn't really mean much to me. So that's all that stuff felt very Star Trek-y. Specifically, it felt very TNG like, but I don't think it was enough to really keep it going. The synthetic lady can do the mind meld.
Yeah, everyone can mind meld.
That's something you could just learn how to do.
Everyone can do it. I know.
I didn't realize you could just like read a book on it and practice really hard.
I'm kind of just at the end of the story, and you know, like I'm even sort of capable of ignoring the fact that it is bizarre that they crash on this planet and the Borg cube crashes on the planet and they just go to it for 3 minutes and then they go off to their own journey.
Not to mention my favorite part of the episode, after when they crash and they're like, and Picard's like, I need to see if they're okay. And Rafi's like, I don't know, if something that big falling that fast, it's going to be really hard to survive it. Cut to them getting to the Borg cube. Everybody is fine.
Everybody's fine. Everyone's just walking around. Perfectly.
You cut to the chase. But this Borg cube that's the size of like Chicago landed right side up, and they just walk in the front door and happen to run into everybody who's in there.
We'll have more thoughts about the Borg, I suppose, later on. But it's I just don't understand. There's no reason for that scene to exist other than you have to get Seven and Elnor into the show in that episode. Right. It's like they don't do anything with them. They just go, and Seven says some nonsense about sensors, and that's her like whole scene. And then Elnor is like, "I'm glad to have known you," and Picard says, "I'm proud of you," and they hug and they walk off, and it's like, this is.
Oh, that's the other thing. Where they walk up and they find it, Girardi's like, "Oh, I guess it's broken now." And then they walk in, and Picard's like, turns to Soji and says, "We survived. This thing didn't." And then they talk to Seven, and she's like, "No, everything works."
Yeah.
What do you need? What do you need? We got replicators going. You need long range sensors. We got that. No problem.
What are they doing? Oh, they're fixing things. That's what they do.
Yeah.
They're the XBs. I mean, possibly the most frustrating thing, because I doubt that they're going to do this. I see no way in hell that there's time for them to resolve this stuff. I am mystified by the Borg cube in this. There's just no reason for that thing to exist in this show. Like, everything about it seems obviously designed just to create a central hub where characters can go to. And Like Seven is drawn to it. Soji, I don't understand why Soji is there at all in the first place. I don't understand what they're doing on this cube. Like what are is it designed just to enable the reclamation of Borg? Are the Romulans doing anything? Is the Federation getting anything out of it? I mean, we've talked about all this stuff, but it was always in the back of my mind, they'll probably explain this. Like, this is such a huge part of the show that we must be getting an explanation, and it just seems like it's not going to happen.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know why the Romulans were on that cube. I also watched the Red Letter Media thing today, and they brought up a really good point. What happened to all the other people on that thing who weren't, who didn't have their name in the credits and also weren't Borg?
Right, the Federation scientists that they show at the beginning.
Yeah, were they part of the evacuation when the Romulans evacuated in the last episode? All those people just kind of disappeared. Everybody else who was actually it went from the Borg cube went from for lack of a better term, multinational group working to help fix these people who used to be Borg into this place is run by the Romulans and it's full of bad guys.
Yeah, it was kind of like Antarctica. How Antarctica is like every country has a little piece of Antarctica that you can go to and sort of do.
And also how you can't fly over it because it's fake and we're actually surrounded by an ice wall.
That's right. There are Borg buried under Antarctica. It's kind of like that. And I mean, I suppose that's like we were just talking before about how you don't need explanations for everything. However, I think the Borg cube here needs some kind of explanation. Like, it's just so important, and people are actively doing something on the cube. Like, the show never tells you what they're doing, but there's a whole lot of people doing something on the cube. And it's just, it comes down to this thing of Seven drives it through the transwarp conduit and shows up and then crashes the thing into a planet. And it's like, wow, like, you know, I wouldn't have endorsed it, but even if the Borg cube had come in as like the cavalry or something and like just
that's what I thought was going to happen.
It didn't even do that. It just comes in and crashes, and then they say hi to Seven and say goodbye.
Yeah, it's, you know, when I say what is this show about, I think all of that is part of my issue, because one episode away from the finale, we've got this battle for the fate of the humanity, I guess. I don't even know what the stakes are here.
I've lost who is actually responsible for killing who at this point. It's just,
it seems to be the destruction of the synthetics on Mars was due to just miscommunication, where the Romulans got the admonition message, but they couldn't handle it, so they thought that they needed to destroy the synths before the synths could destroy them.
Yes, but then it's a message to the synths. Yeah.
It's very, and I guess there's yet another mysterious group that's going to show up of high celestial synth people.
The highest life form of AI are supposed to show up. Yeah.
Sure, why not?
Again, not a mind-blowing revelation. I don't know why this causes people to heads explode, basically, because it seems a pretty stock sci-fi story.
Yeah. Also, you know, if you dial down the resolution of your apocalypse message, maybe it doesn't drive people insane, and then they don't fear you and try to kill you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But you know, that's the plot. That, like, that's what's happening. But that stuff is never what the story is about. You know what I mean? And I don't mean just in Star Trek. I mean just generally. Like, if you look at Star Wars, if you've got Return of the Jedi, where you're flying in the rebel whoever to blow up the Death Star, that's not what the story's about. The story is about the Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader and the Emperor and dealing with that stuff. There's an emotional thematic element, which is what the story is about. I don't know what that is for this show, because they just keep using stuff it's not grounded, it's not connected, it's not explained, and or it's not given a reason to be there other than just there it is. And I find it like looking back at this point, doesn't that episode where they get Bruce Maddox and go down to the weird casino planet seem like extremely weird and out of place?
Yes, it does.
Because it's just a complete side quest that ultimately doesn't matter and doesn't serve anything except to have Girardi kill Maddox.
Yes. The only reason that exists is because Girardi has to kill him to feel guilty about something. And I'm not convinced that he was actually killed there. He that could be an android or something, you know?
Sure.
It's like anything's up in the air at that point. I didn't want to leave your Star Wars point, though, because I don't know if I've talked about this on the podcast before, but...
You hate Star Wars.
Star Wars, let's talk about The Last Jedi. Star Wars is probably a pristine example of the amount of like world details that you need to tell a story, because Star Wars, like I'm talking about New Hope, not any of the others, just Star Wars and New Hope. So Star Wars is this huge galactic war going on between a rebel faction and this like impressive like Imperial force that's led by a robot voiced guy in a black suit who fights with laser swords. And but you get such a good sense of what's going on without it constantly hitting you over the head of what the details of this world are, which are kind of irrelevant to it because it focuses just on Luke's story. And I think that where the Picard series went wrong is that you can do that kind of stuff, but you need to center it on Picard, and you can't just have these sort of like constant details hitting the audience and being like, pay attention to this is going to be important. It's not really about that, and you can forgive a lot.
Baby.
You can forgive
Sorry,
a lot.
I didn't mean to step on your point there.
No, you can forgive a lot. And
definitely, yes.
Like it's just, I think Star Wars is really an accomplishment for that, because I think that it has this incredible universe, but the story is very simple and understandable and stuff like that. And this didn't do that. The storytelling in these series is the opposite of that kind of storytelling.
Yeah, and I know I don't want it to sound like we're saying they don't need to explain so much and then be pissed off that they didn't explain anything, because I think it is two different types of storytelling, and one of them requires clean explanations for the elements you have in your story. Star Wars is not a plotty story. It's very much a lived-in world kind of. I hate to say it's not a character study or anything, but it's like there's not a ton of plot going on in Star Wars. It's pretty straightforward, so that lets you kind of just immerse yourself in the world and not really worry about the details. This thing was set up with all of these mysteries, all of these plot threads. If you're going to do that, you need to be able to explain why everything matters. Otherwise, when you try to pay stuff off, nothing works.
Yeah.
You know, like it's really fascinating to me. And this episode is the first one, especially, I think it's probably since I've seen the stuff that Michael Chabon's been putting on Instagram, which I've been seeing secondhand through you. But there was that one thing he said where that a lot of stuff they had to cut for time, like a lot of exposition and backstory.
Yeah, he focused particularly on Narek and Narissa. He said that in the original scripts, those guys had a whole fleshed out backstory that was like described their relationship.
That doesn't matter.
Bonds.
Yeah. No, that who cares?
Obviously, why it's cut is the ultimate point there.
Yes. That's the thing you put in your story Bible, but you don't put in your script. But like this episode feels like it just got slaughtered as far as that stuff goes, because it just feels like there's so much stuff that they're talking about that is not explained and glossed over, which really should be at this point, or which really shouldn't be at this point. And it just feels like a different show. It
does, yeah. What do you think this series is about? If you had to, what's your main? If you were to say that this show has a theme, what would be the theme that pops into your head?
Well, we had said previously, like regret is a big one.
Yeah.
which I would still probably say that I would say it's regret and the feel, and I guess this is technically still regret, but the feeling that you could do more to help, I guess.
Yeah.
Maybe regret is the word you used there, but it just seems like a lot of the characters have the same sort of motivation or standpoint where it's like they feel like there was an instance in their life where they needed to go above and beyond to help people, and they didn't do it. Maybe not because they chose not to. Some of them yes, some of them no, but they just didn't get the job done.
Yeah,
and so they are now getting the opportunity to do that a little bit.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. And it's I think regret is the right way to sum that up, and I think it's a lot of sort of atoning for mistakes, kind of, in some ways. Like a lot of them aren't.
Maybe that's probably closer to what I mean. Yeah, atoning for mistakes.
And that ties into like the Federation's thing about the synth storyline and stuff like that. I think the secondary storyline, which is, I think regret was like an early theme and it's kind of died out at this point. The second theme that they got in the second half was the idea of like synthetic human rights, or like what it means to treat people like humans. Mm-hmm. And while I'll give the regret of the regret storyline kind of like a C-, I think, because my problem with that stuff is that they've never really dealt with the character's issues that effectively. Like they kind of mention them and they move on from it. But to me, the synthetic storyline is like a complete failure of anything, because there's no clarity to what they're talking about. And like on a plot level, which is just to kick it off, how did the synthetics get reprogrammed by the Romulans? Like,
I have no idea. No idea.
How did this happen so easily?
I don't know.
And so when that falls apart, you end up in this place where I don't know what the synthetics are, because we've seen like 17 different versions of synthetics. We've seen the guys who worked on Mars, who seem to just be robots that were walking around. We've seen Soji, who seems to be almost a person. We've seen the people on this planet who are like half Soji, half Data mixes, where they're not perfect like Soji for some reason.
I think it's just that they're older.
They're the older models that have been upgraded.
Yeah.
I feel that the show, for whatever reason, has not had a lot of conversations between Picard and a synthetic that is actually known to be a synthetic or something. Like Soji doesn't really count, because Soji is essentially a human person to us. Like there's no data-ness to her, so it doesn't really mean anything in the storyline. And the show has not in-depth explained or examined why the synthetics should be treated better than they are at this point, which is very strange. And it's just kind of like I'll wrap it up with this final thing and throw it to you. I think that the Kurtzman style of writing, which is Discovery in this, is it's kind of like this current political strategy where you have a great belief in like the certainty of your belief system, so you just say it and you expect that because you've said it, that's enough to make it kind of true. Like you don't need to explain why this is the case. It's clear that synths are humans. It's clear that they deserve equal rights. Right. But you don't have like the thoughtfulness behind it to be like, well, why is that the case? And I think that really like undoes a lot of the interesting storylines that Star Trek can do, because you kind of need to have a little bit of like, even if you don't believe it, you have to play devil's advocate slightly to make the point come across when you write the story out. And I don't feel that exists in these stories.
Well, as far as the synth thing goes, that if you're dealing with this idea that synthetics were unjustly maligned for the destruction of Mars, and now they are being shunned and looked down upon and hated, there is not a single character on this show who's not a mustache twirling villain who doesn't like synthetics.
Right. The Romulans are the only people that don't like them.
Yeah. Why doesn't instead of Rios having like a PTSD memory about his captain shooting himself in the head over after he lovingly drew a picture of Jana or whatever her name is.
Yeah.
Why isn't Rios like the guy who hates synthetics?
Yeah.
So at least you can have the conversation then about with the two opposing viewpoints about, oh, you can't trust these people. Well, maybe you should, it's not their fault. Like there's no, that's a big storyline on the show, but there's nobody there voicing the story. There's no drama or conflict created because of it, other than this stuff that happened 14 years ago that we have no connection to. And another thing that's the bad guy plot motivated by a weird fever dream.
Right. Yeah.
It's very difficult to explore what those things mean if you've got nobody there to explore it with. And it's not like Picard hates synths.
Right.
And by the end of the show, he's like, you know what? I was wrong. Synths, I thought it was okay for me to hate synths, but I had, one of my best friends was a synth, and I thought that was enough. But they're all great. There's not that stuff. It's just everybody's fine with them.
Yeah, and even outside of like just a pure like effective narrative storytelling situation where you need that kind of thing, the series itself is confused about this, because if you have Rios be that character, or you have this sort of general ban on synths and stuff, all that seems to mean is that you can't build a robot body, because Rios's holograms are synthetic intelligence. Like, there's no consistency to what it means. Does that mean that people just hate a Terminator style robot that walks around, but they're fine with any kind of other intelligence? Yeah,
I mean, if they're giving you a physical, they're cool, but at the minute they pick up a hammer, you got to shut it down. Although the holograms can do stuff. I guess it's because they're tethered to a computer system or something. I don't know. So that makes it okay.
Yeah,
it's like a safety default.
You can deactivate them by yelling at them. Basically, you can say turn off yourself. Yeah.
If not, I mean, even Rios. If you want to keep Rios's weird backstory, make Rafi the one who hates synthetics. She should. She lost her job because of them.
No, I think you could make you could make Rios hate synthetics, but he uses a holographic crew, right? Which shows his sort of hypocrisy that exists within him. And he can have some kind of argument that they aren't holograms because they're partially me. Like, I am a part of them. And then you have this thing where Soji is like, well, I feel the same because I'm part of Data, or I'm part of Maddox or whatever, and I feel like I'm a person. And then you actually have some kind of character interactions between the two of them. I don't know. It's strange. Yeah.
Yeah. Instead of him taking a look at her and then having a revelation that he explains through 10 minutes of backstory.
Yeah. Yeah, I know.
Oy. Backstory.
How before we get to the finale, what's your...
And plus, sorry, you could also, if he hates synthetics, he's on a ship with fucking Agnes Girardi, who was the lead scientist at the Daystrom Institute working on synthetics. Then they're butting heads and stuff, and then they're falling in love, and that's right. That's where character conflict comes from. Where you've got, there's a synthetic situation over here. Agnes Girardi thinks it's good and they should be dealt with in a certain way. Rios thinks it's bad and they should be dealt with another way. And that you can have those interactions. Yeah. But instead, it's just a bunch of people who are all fine with synthetics and just sitting on a ship together.
Yeah. Yeah. And because none of those characters have a hatred of synthetics, you're left relying on the Romulans to be the bad guys of this story. And the Romulans being the bad guys is just... I think what's completely fascinating to me about the setup for this series is that they set it up at a point where fans were clamoring to know what happened post Star Trek 2009, right? That's the first, the first Kelvin movie. They're like, we haven't seen any timeline past that. What happened to the Romulan star? What happened as the fallout of all that stuff? What happened post-Dominion? And they set us up here with an interesting tease about what that universe is supposed to be like, right? But by the end of this story, none of that matters, really. Like
Right.
the Romulan culture has been so unexplained as to what they're doing, or like what's the status of the Romulan Empire at this point. Like, what's going on? How can you?
I don't know.
How can you set up this story where their main stars exploded? They're refugees apparently, but at the same time they still have power to have treaties with people and hold on to this cube and stuff. It just doesn't make any. It's weird that they took that setup and chose not to do anything with it. What you would think would be the prime story there is what happens to an empire that's been destroyed that way.
Yeah, I mean, if you go into this story and you just change it to Romulus never blew up, almost nothing changes.
Nothing changes. Yeah.
And I don't know what the status of them is supposed to be, because you've got, like you said, you've got on the one hand they're refugees, so the implication there is that there is a lot fewer of them because the planet blew up, and one of the main catalysts of the story is how Picard is mad because they couldn't save everybody.
Right.
Yet they have 250 warbirds they can spare to fly 25 light years to blow up a synthetic homeworld.
Yes. Yeah.
And they have a functioning military.
Apparently.
Not to mention a secret police and a super secret police, all apparently operating in conjunction with each other. Like when I saw Commodore O flying that warbird at the end, I didn't know what that meant, other than, oh yeah, we got to put her in the story. Because if she's a Zhat Vash, but do the Zhat Vash have 250 ships?
Right. Are they? Are they divorced from Romulan society, or are they Romulan society at this point?
Yeah. Like is the Zhat Vash, is she a Zhat Vash operating inside the Tal Shiar, also inside of Starfleet, but operating inside the Tal Shiar, she is gathering up regular Romulan forces to go blow up these androids.
Right. So are the Romulans being suckered into this as well by O? Yeah. Oh.
Yeah, there's really no understanding of what the motivations and the positioning is for anything Romulan related, other than we got to blow the androids up because it made my nose bleed when I thought about it.
That's really and it's not you can't rewrite the show or anything, but I see the bones that are there. Like I think we've talked about it on the show, but it's like the Romulans finding the cube to me feels like it's or maybe I've only written about this on Discord or something, but like I see a series here where the Romulan Empire is destroyed. They find this cube, right? They use the cube because they're like, we need to get our footing back. Let's use this incredibly powerful technology that's incredibly dangerous, but let's use this to try to get into an arms race with the Federation because we need to reassert ourselves. In response to that, and because the Dominion War was so catastrophic to the labor force, Starfleet has to churn out synthetic life forms to do work for them, right? So you create this secondary class of citizens in the Federation who are built to do work and are not treated with the respect that the Federation citizens would expect. And it's an arms race between the Federation and the Romulans to see who can come out on top in that regard. At that point, the synthetic thing becomes like the ultimate weapon, because you would understand why the Romulans would want AI like that and why the Federation would be terrified of it and stuff like that. And Maddox is doing something that neither the Federation or the Romulans understand what Maddox is doing, so they're both trying to find him and things like that. And it just feels like there's a core of a story, but what they did was they just spun endless mysteries around every piece of that until you could no longer really see that that's the case about what's going on. And I think that kind of backstory is necessary for this kind of story that they're telling, because I can't track this like sort of plot on plot storyline that they stuck instead of it. And especially if you're not going to give it a like a metaphor or a theme really by the end of it, right. I don't know why you bothered.
And so going into the last episode, I assume because the excuse excuse me, the universal trope or the universal symbol of your friend showing up to save you at the last minute is to have you not be able to get through to them on communications 10 minutes earlier. Should we assume that this fleet that was going to Deep Space 12 is now coming to them and is going to end up fighting the Romulans? I assume, right?
Do you think that'll happen?
Well, I think I feel like it probably will, but because it seems to be the way it's set up. But if it does, I feel like it's just blowing whatever the Romulan Federation relationship is, just completely shattering that in two.
Yes. That's why I can't imagine it happening, actually.
I honestly, in this show, I wouldn't put it past them to do it and not realize what the consequences of that is. Because we don't know. Because I don't know what is the current relationship between the Federation and the Romulans.
They have a treaty. That's all we know. There's no neutral zone, and they have a treaty.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's about it. I could very easily see them doing that and forgetting that they have a treaty. The writers forgetting that they have a treaty or something.
Right. Yeah.
So, like, if Starfleet doesn't show up, or let's say Starfleet, how would it work if they don't show up to blow up the Romulans? Is Seven gonna fire up the Borg cube and blow them up with the Borg cube?
If that Borg cube gets off that planet, I'm just gonna throw the TV through the window. Like that thing can't be functional at this point. There's no, I don't know, but I mean, that's what I thought at the start, that like while there was this hopeless battle coming on, the cube would just come through and just shoot the shit out of everybody.
Yeah,
and
that's what I thought was gonna happen.
That would be the end of it, because that makes a sense. And you know, one, it's another of like the potential of what they could have done with the Borg here, which was really good at the start, but it's like the cube coming in and destroying the 200 some odd warbirds is like, oh yeah, that's right. That's why these things were so terrifying in the first place. And you're just not going to get a sense of that. Instead, it crash landed and has a nice beachfront property at this point.
So if it's not Starfleet showing up to fight the Romulans while some other bullshit happens on the planet, I'm thinking
it's the Kelpians and Lars. Lars and the Kelpians.
No, I'm thinking because Starfleet has to show up, right? They have to show up. If you're, let's just, assuming they do show up.
Is this building? They're just going to build the series until we see 250 starships at the end in the final episode. Is that's the way they want to tease this out?
Why not?
Ugh, I'd be so upset.
Would you? Yeah. So let's say that the Starfleet is involved and the ships are involved. If they're not blowing up the Romulans, they're either going to show up and somehow be like depowered, and then the androids and the Borg cube are going to save the day. And at the end, it's going to be like, look, Federation, the androids aren't as bad as you thought. And also, don't be mean to these ex-Borgs anymore because they just saved your ass.
Yeah.
Or the Starfleet's going to show up like right after everything happens. Like the whole battle or whatever is going to happen, and then Starfleet's going to show up after it's all over. And if they do get into a fight, this is how I think they get around the treaty. If they do get into a fight, if Starfleet shows up and they get into a fight with the Romulans, there's going to be a line after everything is done about how the Zhat Vash is not considered part of Romulan whatever proper.
Right.
So it's a political thing where they're separating themselves from the Romulan. We're going to keep an eye on the Romulans, but everything's intact for now.
Yeah.
Some shit like that.
They're like a terrorist cell operating within the Romulan Empire that doesn't
not
take
even
responsibility.
Not even the chancellor of the new Romulan Empire knew about the Zhat Vash.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah. I don't see that happening. I mean, that to me, I would bet again. I would say it's like a 10% chance that we see Starfleet in this. I think that doesn't feel appropriate. Although now that I'm thinking about it, to wrap this thing up, I don't know what the appropriate resolution is. If Admiral Clancy shows up and says, "I can't believe how fucking wrong I was," or something, I'd be like, "Wow, what a joke! What a joke to have that." I personally don't see this series ending with Starfleet recognizing itself. That would seem so odd. If someone from Starfleet showed up and said, you know what, we were wrong and you were right, Jean-Luc, like we're going to change our policy, that feels really strange that they would even bother doing it at that point.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm just trying to think of like the pieces that they have in play. How do these things shake out? Because I'm assuming what happens is the Romulans show up and there's Rios and Seven of Nine have to fight them off while Picard has a heart-to-heart talk with Soji to get her to stop, to break from Sutra and stop them from signaling the robot overlords or whatever.
Yeah. I could see Soji. It's totally within the spirit of this. Like Soji, like transcends to another level, you know. And
yes,
like I could totally see that happening. And she like, she blink or she snaps the Romulan fleet away and they like disappear or something.
How about this? All of the androids come together to form a giant Voltron of androids, and they're 250 feet tall, and they just start punching ships out of the sky.
It would make more sense. And
they all have, and it has Brent Spiner's face.
Yeah, I don't know. I'll stay away from the speculation, I guess. I feel extremely sure that it's not going to be a satisfying ending for me. I just don't see it happening that way.
Yeah, it's just so weird because like the fate of your story now rests on yet a third android with Soji's face that we don't know anything about, who has different, like the fate of your story rests on a brand new character introduced in the second to last episode.
Yes. Yeah.
And it just feels really weird to me to go into the finale with so much having happened and so little of it ultimately mattering.
Yeah.
To the point where I don't know what's going to happen. And I say that a lot, and I mean it not in a good way. Because I don't know exactly who the players are and what the stakes are. Yeah, I don't know.
What's your take on Patrick Stewart at this point? What's your take on Picard and Patrick Stewart, I suppose? If you have any sort of... I just ask because Patrick Stewart seems particularly old in this episode to me. I don't know if his age had some kind of impact on this story. It seems that would not be the case, because that'd be something like you'd almost realize halfway through shooting it that something wasn't working, or that like you'd notice a lot of like stand-ins or body doubles or something like that. But he's the Red Letter Media guys just brought up a point, and I wonder if you like. Do you think Patrick Stewart likes the character of Picard? They mentioned this in their review just by saying that they feel that this series is a bunch of people who don't really care about the material, just happy to have a job, sort of making a show.
I don't agree with that. I mean, he didn't need to do this.
No, that's the strange thing to me.
You know, I feel like everybody who worked on the show the jury's out on Brent Spiner because he seems to not really give a shit. But everybody else seems to have, if not reverence for the material itself, at least reverence for the fans of the material.
Can I interrupt you? Did you see on Discord, did you see, I think Kyle posted that interview clip with Calmini?
No, I don't watch the stuff Kyle puts up.
Okay, good. So Calmini was on like some kind of, it looked like an Irish interview show or something. Mm-hmm. And the guy was just, it's a very short clip. It's like 2 minutes. And the host was kind of... Is that
the show's called Chuggin', right?
The host asks Calmini, he's like, did you ever feel stupid on Star Trek? And he starts going into him, I thought fairly like somewhat hostile in a way, because I don't know if he only watches like realistic mumblecore movies or something, but he's like, what's it like when actors are out there sort of saying nonsense and, you have to wear these like uniforms and stuff like that. And Colmini had Colmini seemed almost caught off guard and like he was actually still embarrassed by it in some way. And I don't know if that's just a Colmini thing or if that actually goes to the rest of the actors in varying degrees to some level. Like, it just got me wondering about Patrick Stewart, what he actually thinks about Picard. Like, does he look back on that in any way other than that's what the show that got my career started, really? Like,
I think he must.
You think he does? Yeah.
If you look at his career, the thing that has made him who he is genre show / movie after genre show / movie. Like, he was Captain Picard, and then he was Professor Xavier, and like I think he has to have some reverence for that at the very least, because of you can't do that stuff. You can't do Picard for 7 years and then 3 movies and then do Professor X for like 20 years.
Right.
And not understand why people like it. And, I don't think the people would be doing the conventions if they didn't like it, Maybe it's probably not something they go back and watch all the time, but I think there's got to be a level of enjoyment or reverence for the show, if only because of what it means to other people.
Maybe the convention thing always confuses me a little bit because Shatner talks about the conventions that he does, but he's very open on Twitter and stuff about how much things cost to do stuff with him. Right. So it's like I think that the conventions are enough of a moneymaker for them where it does hide their true feelings about things like this. Yeah. I don't know. Like, I don't need Patrick Stewart to love the show or the series or anything. And it is strange if he didn't like it enough that he would want to come back to it. But, the propaganda that they pitched at the start of this, which is that they went to Stewart with such a killer story that he couldn't say no. It was like the Godfather offer.
Oh,
and
Jesus.
If that's the case, I don't know what he saw in it.
Maybe he's just bad at picking scripts.
He could be.
He was in that Christmas movie we watched, so
that's right. Yeah, maybe we'll have more to say about Stewart at the end of this.
Yeah, it's just really fascinating when you think about it that way, because it's like he wanted to do so. The only way he would come back is if we did something unlike anything we've ever done with Captain Picard before. So we wrote a story that involved Data and some Borg.
Yeah, and Stewart just kind of tags along with a bunch of other characters. And yeah.
I'll be honest with you. I could see being in the room as Patrick Stewart and them pitching this story to me and really loving it.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're going to pitch it to him based on the themes that they're trying to lay down, where you've got your refugee stuff with the synth, with the Romulans, and your
I'd say the growing older. It would be something that Stewart would be
growing older, which is not something. The right of every Star Trek captain is to have a movie or at least an extended story where you deal with getting old, and he never really got to do that.
Yep.
But I could see this story be really engaging if they're pitching it to me. I just don't think they remembered what made the pitch engaging.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's too bad. Well, we can
either that. I mean, who knows? Maybe he was just like, I need to buy a new house or I want to retire, so let me do 20 episodes of Star Trek across two seasons. It'll take me a year and a half, 2 years to shoot.
Yeah,
and then I can retire and never have to work again.
Yeah, it could be. It easily could be.
And I mean, honestly, if you're thinking about it from a cynical standpoint, it's a hell of a retirement plan. Because, I mean, you keep that in your back pocket until you need it, and then you're like, I think I'm going to come back to Star Trek, and everybody loses their mind.
Right. He's the ultimate. He held the cards in that situation.
Yes.
Yeah, he could wait until he wanted to wrap up or he wanted to do something else, and then he can play it, and everyone will come running for him. Yeah. Anything else about this one before we go? I guess.
What was that thing that they handed to Rafi that looked like the ocarina from Legend of Zelda?
It fixes things.
It's so funny because I just watched an episode of Supergirl where Martian Manhunter gives Supergirl's sister, who's just a regular human, a weapon that is like a Martian technology weapon that can turn into whatever weapon she needs to turn into. She just has to think about it.
Right.
So it could be a gun, or it could be like brass knuckles or a knife or something. And that was the first thing I thought of, where it's like, here's a magic thing that can do whatever you need it to do.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about what they said at the end of Red Letter Media? Do you think Picard is going to plug into the Borg cube?
No.
No?
No.
That's too interesting. They probably won't do it.
It is. I mean, I think it's going to be very similar to this season finale of Discovery's second season, which was 45 minutes of laser fights in space and 5 minutes of wrapping the plot up. I don't know if you remember the Discovery season finale, but that was pretty much it. It was like we were surprised by how much of the episode was just the ships blasting the shit out of each other with laser beams. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like they're really working extra hard to make sure that that's how this also ends, even though it doesn't feel like it earns it at all.
Yeah.
But we'll see. Yeah, it's really depressing to me that this show ultimately has been a chore to watch.
I felt that particularly strongly in the past couple episodes. I think I started off with somewhat high hopes, and it just...
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Yeah, but like after episode 4 or so, it's just when it was clear that there was not really anybody... There was not a clear story driving the ship of the series. It became just like a laborious thing to get through.
Yeah.
I was like, well, okay, maybe Riker will show up. Nope, not yet. Nope, maybe okay, it looks like Riker's showing up. Finally. And that was like one big gasp of air, and then back into the minds of the admonition and the Conclave of 8. What is the Conclave of 8? It's 8 stars, right?
Yeah, the stars. Yeah.
Is that where the planet is?
Yes.
What does that have to do with anything?
Is Aria the grief planet the planet that they're currently on? That's my question.
No idea.
I don't know either.
You would think if it was, they'd be able to find them pretty quick.
Well, if they are, it's
because the Romulan, the Zhat Vash went to the grief planet to put their hands in the magic hula hoop.
Yeah.
To find out all this other stuff, and then they left, and they just didn't check 2 towns over, I guess, for the synthetic city of twins.
I feel like there's just like a connection missing there or something. Like it kind of comes down to the Bruce Maddox thing. I just don't know where Bruce Maddox was for what he was doing really for that whole time. We've already talked about Bruce Maddox, so I'll just wrap it up there.
Why was it necessary for Rafi to know what the Conclave of 8 was? Because they just needed somebody to know, right?
Yeah. Well, she just knew it was a star system or something, right? Isn't that the reason? She didn't know anything else outside of that.
She knew of it because in some sort of conspiracy sense.
Oh, she did?
Yeah, because
I'm blacking everything out, I guess.
Yeah, when she goes to see her son, he's like, "You would just come home drunk, spouting stuff about synthetic revolution and the Conclave of 8." That's where it popped up, and I was like, "That's going to be important." And it's not going to make any sense.
Oh, Jesus.
Because they just dropped it in conversation. And then when it came up, she was like, I knew it. The Conclave of 8.
Why does she know that?
I don't know.
The organics came, and now we have lost another sister. They will always fear us, always turn on us, hunt us, kill us. In one day, our enemies will be here with overwhelming force, intent on exterminating us. That gives us just enough time.
Just enough time for what?
When I melded with her mind, I experienced this so-called admonition. But unlike you, I understood it. For you, it was a warning. For us, it was a promise.
I guess this is a good place as any.
Too much plot for one TV show here.
Before we wrap up, I was considering on the podcast, I don't know if this will actually happen because it's based on a lot of external factors that I can't control, but is there anybody out there who knows of a critical review of this series that ultimately enjoys it in the sense that...
Oh, I thought you were going to say we should all get together and lick our palms and rub them on each other's faces.
Yeah, well, after we get done with that, maybe someone will have an answer for me. But is there like any review that people know, or YouTube series or podcast or anything, where it's a critical look at the things? So it's not just sort of fanning out and saying like, "Oh, isn't it great that Patrick Stewart is back as Picard?" But there's like a sort of like a, not academic, but like people actually looking at the story and coming away from it saying that this is actually very good. I'm interested in that. If anyone can find that, I've heard a few references that people have mentioned on the Discord, but if there's anyone like that, let me know in the comments or send an email or whatever, because I'm interested in that. And maybe there would be some kind of wrap-up podcast where we invite someone who's extremely pro the series on, and I just can see if they can change my mind about something. We did that for Discovery in the first season. I think it would be worth doing again for this one, but I can find enough people screaming about... What's that?
Who did we have on for that one?
Kyle from Trexpertise.
Was I there for that, or was that just you? I don't remember.
I think you were there. I'm pretty sure you were there. Yeah.
I blacked that out too.
That was the first season of Discovery, so it's a long time ago.
I feel like this question comes up at the end of every one of these seasons.
If anyone knows anyone who likes the show.
By the end of every one of these new Trek seasons, it's like, if anyone could tell us someone who actually likes this and doesn't just sound like an idiot.
I don't want to be hard on, but there are plenty of podcasts out there that I would argue really enjoy the show, but to me don't give me a good reason as to why they like the show. But so if there are podcasts or something, or YouTube videos or something like that, let me know. Because I just kind of need to see that. I don't know. I find it strange because you saw that. We'll wrap out with this. Did you watch the other video that someone posted on the Star Trek channel about the difference between modern Trek and old Trek?
Was it Kyle? Because no, if so.
I don't think it was Kyle. But there's the video on the Discord.
I did not watch that, no.
I'll put a link to it. I disagree with a lot of it, and it just leaves me wondering the people who really like the modern Trek, where they're kind of coming from. It's just interesting because I have a very hard time latching onto it. I really don't know. Do you know of any other series that get this kind of response from the fan base that are... I was thinking The Mandalorian, but I think Mandalorian is better than this show is. Mm-hmm. It might not knock your socks off, but it's like I can't say that The Mandalorian is an actively bad TV show.
Right.
I just can't think of another series where the fans of it are so positive for it, but like the critical reception is so cold to it.
Yeah. My well, maybe, I don't know about critical reception because I wasn't really following that stuff at the time, but for my money, I could never understand what people liked about The Walking Dead. Yeah. I watched like the first 3 seasons of that show, and I was just like, people are going nuts for this, and I don't know why. Because nobody, it just, it was fun from like a gorehound point of view, but as far as stuff that was happening and the characters and everything, it was just a mess. Yeah. And, but people seem to love it. It's been on for 9 fucking years or whatever. Maybe Entourage. Did you ever watch Entourage? I did not. I did not watch Entourage. Entourage might be that kind of a thing too, which was, it got really stupid. Sons of Anarchy is kind of the same way too, I suppose. Maybe there's other examples. I liked Sons of Anarchy for like 1 season. The first 2 were fine. The second season of that show was actually very good, and then it quickly fell completely apart. Real silly, real fast. The Sons of Anarchy version of the ships in Discovery shooting each other for 45 minutes is them chasing somebody on motorcycles, which they do 27 minutes of every episode, I think. Yeah, yeah. All right.
that's it. Thank you very much, guys, for listening. Patreon.com/thepensky File is the best way to support the show if you enjoyed the content. A couple $1 a month gets you extra stuff. And I hope everyone's doing well with the coronavirus. We'll be back to finish off the Picard series next week, and that's it. I'm in the middle of a move, so after that, there might be a little bit of a lull in material, but we'll figure something out after Picard ends because we have to figure out where the Star Trek podcast goes after that. So,
well, if you need me to cover, I can do a couple episodes where I talk about all the wasted potential of Tasha Yar for like 5 hours. I'll do one hardcore history length episode about Tasha Yar.
She's going to be the advanced creature that shows up in the 10th episode of this. And
oh
Picard
my God,
says, Tasha,
I would love
back.
it.
That's it.
It's going to be 5 episodes. Each episode's going to be 4.5 hours long. Me talking about the ins and outs of why Tasha was underutilized.
Ins and outs. That's it, guys. Thank you very much for listening. Social media links are down below. You can click all those. Patreon.com/thepensky is the best way to support us. And I think that's it. I'm very sad. I was happy for this series. I was really looking forward to it. And I don't know. I'll have more thoughts in the final episode, I suppose, about this. I know that we didn't talk about this episode particularly all that strongly in this one, but I think that the larger meta aspects of this are really more important to me than anything else.
Well, quick, what was your favorite part of the episode? Yep, there we go. Covered it.
I liked the vests, and I liked their... Honestly, it might have been the visuals of seeing the cube come through the conduit and then crash. It was kind of cool.
Yeah.
It's not enough for me to bring up in the normal part of this podcast as a moment that I really enjoyed, but I did like seeing it crash or the crashed results or something. But I think that's it.
What about how they covered how Narek could possibly have followed them by Soji saying essentially, I don't know, I guess he guessed where we were going to go.
Yeah, he extrapolated our position.
And then he uses his cloaking device to throw a duplicate.
Yes. Yeah.
Decoy.
Yeah.
That's kind of fun. Can everybody do that?
I'd hope so. That maybe there's not 250 Romulan warbirds. It's just 125 or whatever.
Yeah. I will say, in all seriousness, I think my favorite part of the episode was the scene with Jurati and Picard, where the silent back and forth about his disease.
Yeah.
I really liked that. I thought that was really good.
I know we've gone long here, but I agree that's a good scene. I mean, I don't really buy that they have that relationship here, and the whole build up to that, like when Picard gives his speech about like, I don't want any of you shitheads giving me any grief about dying.
I'm dying, so shut up.
That scene works in a show where I believe that crew has built a relationship with each other.
Sure.
It doesn't work here whatsoever for me. And also it was another one of those weird plot beats where I kind of wondered if that information being revealed early in their journey would have been better.
I was just thinking that, yeah.
Where they're like, listen, old man, like you're dying. What's the point of doing this? Like, why don't you go home to your vineyard and just pass away? And him saying, no, I have to fight through this, and this is like more important than that and stuff like that. It doesn't feel like it fits appropriately here to be revealed at this point.
Yeah, or if like they know early on, maybe Rios pulls Raffi aside and he's like, he wants to go down to this casino planet wearing an eye patch and a fake French accent. Are we sure he's not just dying from the brain down?
Just scan him. Give him a good scan. Yeah, it's just another one of the throw it on the pile of, I can't believe they kind of introduced him dying in this series, and it really doesn't matter all that much. It's not a focal point of it. It's people are sad because they're supposed to be sad that Captain Picard is dying, but it doesn't matter. All right, we're done. Clay, do you have anything you want to plug?
If you'd like to check out the Rotten Horror Picture Show, which is the new show that Amanda and I have been doing about the movies off of the 200 best horror movies of all time list on Rotten Tomatoes, we'd be much obliged for you to do that. We just covered Starry Eyes, which is a under the radar favorite of mine from 2014. So check that out.
Yep. And then Marriage Story is our final Oscar contender. We're a little bit late with it, but our Marriage Story is going out this Tuesday, the coming Tuesday, so a couple days from now.
Also, Marriage Story also on the 200 best horror movies list.
Yes, that's right.
It's number 5, actually.
A surprise ranking, but we killed 2 birds with one stone. We threw it right through the drywall. Thank you guys very much for listening. Hope you enjoyed Picard. Let us know what you thought in the comments below. You can email us, all that stuff, social media. Otherwise, have a good one. We'll be back with the final episode, Et in Arcadia Ego Part 2 next week. See ya.